Jimmy Dore, just admit you got it wrong, brother. Just admit you got it wrong. You don't have to. It's okay. Your balls will not explode. Your dick will not fall off. You will not be less of a man. You just admit it.
Only thing she does is like occasionally escalate her rhetoric about Republicans.
Yes.
She'll be like, oh, you're fascists, you're Nazis. She'll like use the words that like, that's zero. That's nothing. That's just being an extra Democrat.
That's right. That's right. And
can I just make one more point, Jimmy? Can I just make one more point?
No.
Yes, I have to. Yes, shut up, Jimmy. I wasn't really asking. Here's the thing. I do want to say one thing. Like, I do believe that like AOC was genuinely rattled by what happened at the Capitol. She is the target of right-wing media in a pretty demonizing way. I'm sure it was like unsettling to have these mobs running through the Capitol. You have no idea if they're armed, what their intentions are. I'm sure that was scary. She made it through completely unscathed, not an even tiny little bruise on her body. Every other member of Congress in the Democratic caucus, including Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and others, are equally demonized. And they're fucking over it. They got over it. If you want to be a member of Congress, you...
Okay, first of all, let me just stop you right there. AOC is literally on every right-wing media every day. You know, because you practically live at Fox News, Glenn. So you know that that's not true. AOC is numero uno target. That's just, come on, man. So let's be real here. And AOC is right about the Republicans. The fact that Democrats don't call them what they are, which is an anti-democratic fascist party, is part of the problem.
You can't constantly center your own like lived experiences. You're not there to like center yourself in every drama. If you have an opportunity to strike a blow against Wall Street and the massive inequality and suffering that it causes, you don't have the right to refuse.
Okay. I see where this is going.
It's been like the most amazing week of having the left and the right unite against Wall Street. Almost everybody across the spectrum supports what those Redditors are doing and is thrilled to see these hedge fund leeches suffering. And it has it's created a major opportunity to regulate, to legislate, to reform.
Except that's not true. This is 100% pure delusion. And I can't believe that Glenn is this naive. So he must be lying. I don't know why. He's specifically talking about how AOC called out Ted Cruz because he tried to clout farm off of her when she talked about Wall Street. And I want to show you something. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that this guy, seriously, this guy wants to regulate Wall Street? Ted Cruz didn't report Goldman Sachs loan in Senate race. As Ted Cruz tells it, the story of how he financed his upstart campaign for the United States Senate 4 years ago is an endearing example of loyalty and shared sacrifice between a married couple. The couple's decision to pump more than $1 million into Cruz's successful Tea Party darling Senate bid in Texas was made easier by a large loan from Goldman Sachs. The loan was not disclosed in campaign finance reports. His wife, Heidi, works at Goldman Sachs. Now let me ask you this. You really believe that the guy who's literally there for an illegal loan he got from Goldman Sachs and his wife who works there wants to regulate Wall Street, Glenn? That AOC should lend the credibility she has built up with regular everyday people to Ted Cruz? You can't be serious. Donald Trump said he was going to regulate what's known, one of the most famous loopholes in income tax, which is known as the carried interest loophole, which allows hedge funders to pay their income as long-term capital gains. So you and I go to our job, we work $10 an hour, and we make a paycheck, we get a $100 paycheck, we have to pay income tax rates on that. Hedge funder gets paid fees for managing a hedge fund. He pays capital gains tax rate, which is 15 or 20% long-term capital gains. He pays a lower tax rate than the secretary at his office. And Ted Cruz is going to be the guy that you want to work with? Are you deluded? Are you insane? They were just trying to get clout. off of a media story. They don't believe in Wall Street reforms. Come on.
Spectrum supports what those Redditors are doing and is thrilled to see these hedge fund leeches suffering. And it has it's created a major
hedge fund leeches like his wife?
Opportunity to regulate, to legislate, to reform. And Ted Cruz, whatever you think of him, reached out by saying, I agree with AOC about this. So that was an opportunity for right and left to join together to do something that supports.
This is centrist brainwormism. Centrist Dems going out there and deluding themselves they could work with centrist Republicans, which don't exist. This is the same thing. It's people who call themselves left thinking they could work with far-right people because they're anti-establishment. Hey, idiot, they're right-wing. They don't agree with you. They don't want to do anything with you. I literally can't believe that this is real.
Supposedly her main reason for existing as a political figure, which is fighting income inequality, and instead she turns around and says, fuck you, I don't want to work with you. You guys got me murdered. You're a white supremacist. And suddenly the two camps divide again, and over here you have the red team, and over here you have the blue team cheering like morons at a fucking high school football game again because she ruined that movement because all she wants to do is attack Republicans and fortify the Democratic Party.
Okay, he's brain dead. He's actually brain dead. Glenn, Ted Cruz is not going to work to regulate Wall Street. Tea Party Ted Cruz, funded by illegal Goldman Sachs loan, is not going to regulate Wall Street. And the big problem is that a lot of people on the left don't realize Republicans are bad. Apparently, Glen Greenwald doesn't realize that Republican Ted Cruz is bad. I thought that lefties thought both teams were bad. Apparently, they think that if you point out that the Republican Party is a Christo-fascist party, you're being naive. Glenn, name one substantial reform of Wall Street that Ted Cruz is seriously advancing.
That is what the left has become, and they know it. And that's why all that's left for them to do is do things like talk about your personality and occasionally mine.
It is stunning to see AOC turn into Adam Schiff. It is stunning to me to see her just totally.
Except she hasn't changed any position. She continues to be a leader on Medicare for all. We have significantly increased the power of the progressive movement. You can see it happening right now with Bernie Sanders as the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. They're going to be using reconciliation. They're talking about DC statehood. They're talking about House Resolution 1, which would be a significant positive reform of our politics, which will allow grassroots candidates a serious opportunity to run and get funding that doesn't come from wealthy donors. I mean, it's so obvious they've never read a single thing that's happening in politics right now. They just sit there as a grift to disempower you. That's their goal. Democrat bad, Republican bad, but Democrat worse. That's it. That's their thing. What I want is fighters. I want leftists. And the one thing that a leftist knows is that you can't ally with the right. Every time you do, they stab you in the back. Get it together. I know it's a cliche to read a book. God damn it, man. The right, far right, is there to shore up the system. Read about fascism. Read about Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is about as far right as it gets. What does she do? She has television ads where she's riding a Humvee and she shoots a sign that explodes that says socialism on it. They're not going to work with you.
Really focus all her ire. And it started for me.
Disturbing breaking news. A Texas man who participated in the Capitol riot is now charged with threatening to assassinate Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. These charges coming as the investigation into the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol.
I had a very close encounter where I thought I was going to die. It is not an exaggeration to say that many, many members of the House were nearly assassinated. It's just not an exaggeration to say that at all. We were very lucky that things happened within certain minutes that allowed members to escape the House floor unharmed. But many of us nearly and narrowly escaped death.
Just admit it. You know, when you get something wrong, just be like, hey, I got it wrong. Let me minimize this from the comfort of my home office. The dumb left and their orbit are constantly minimizing the harm of that happened that day, including specifically mocking AOC for saying that. I mean, it's just gross, man. It's just gross. AC was doing what Glenn is saying and brought on the stock guy on her Twitch stream. I know, Pepe La. Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started. Dore's far too proud to ever admit he got something wrong. Why would he? Why would he admit he got something wrong? His audience doesn't have the wherewithal. If you want to see someone who's crying crocodile tears, compare Tucker Carlson, violent mob. A man was arrested for his assassination threats who was at the Capitol against AOC. Let's look at what their pal Tucker Carlson. I'm going to wait for their video making fun of Tucker.
The whole thing was completely grotesque, and the effect is to make it, impossible to open your mail. I mean, our conversation publicly has been hijacked by extremists like this, and I worry that if we don't stand up to them and say, "I'm sorry, this is not allowed. You can't threaten people into silence." The rest of us are very passive in the face of this.
Back during the great terrorist siege of January 6th, Sandy Cortez found herself in the same city as Chewbacca Guy. Literally in the same city. Trapped and abandoned, just like those lonely, valiant troops in Corregidor so many years ago. She really thought she was going to die.
The whole thing was completely grotesque.
So, somebody spray paints an Antifa, an anarchist symbol on his driveway. Oh, God, it's grotesque. I'm scared to open my mail. AOC, feet from people bellowing for her blood. Someone shot and killed trying to bash their way into the Capitol. People chanting, hang Mike Pence, where is Nancy Pelosi? Tweeting threats about AOC as they're in the Capitol. Oh, yeah, you're such a baby. 5 people dead. Now 7. 7 have died from those events. Let's show you what the right-wingers are like when they're actually private. Let's show you what the QAnoners are like.
Alarming audio from an online chat room gives fresh insight into why Trump supporters and QAnon believers held out hope that Donald Trump would have remained president even up until Inauguration Day. Let's take a listen to some of what they said in their own voices and their own words.
If you're just going to walk away, why do you have 65,000 troops in there in D.C.? That makes no sense.
Why do you think they deputize all them people, man, or marshalize them? They don't have anybody else that will arrest them, so they have to find somebody that'll do it.
The source I follow, I heard, said Trump can file or call martial law even up to 5 minutes before Biden's inauguration if he has to.
His farewell speech is going to be he declares martial law, and then as he's doing that, they're arresting the people like Biden's administration and all those corrupt suckers. And that's why they have all the security around the White House, Capitol Hill area.
Joining me now is Stuart Thompson. He collected this audio for a visual storytelling piece in the New York Times opinion section. Stuart, welcome. It's pretty extraordinary to listen to all this. It's very revealing, of course. First of all, what made you start listening, and what went through your mind as you heard all that was being said?
Well, I started off basically looking at the Stop the Steal movement, so the people claiming that the election was stolen, and that led down the rabbit hole that connected to these big Q groups that believe in this grand conspiracy that involves sex trafficking rings and other crimes. And the group was really assembling to discuss the rally on January 6th. And it was just interesting to listen in as they made these predictions for what was going to happen. And key to the Q movement and its resilience is moving goalposts down the road constantly. So as that day ended and none of their prophecies came true, the next kept listening and kept hearing about their predictions and all the misinformation that they are constantly consuming.
Wow. The Jimmy Dore Show is a comedy lifeline for people on the left and right.
Well, listen, it's all worth playing a little more.
Nice.
Let's listen to what folks were saying about taking action against members of Congress. Here's that.
Hey, you can say he's just joking.
Storm the Congress and the Senate and pull all them treasonous guys out of there.
Patriots are in the building. It's beautiful.
Does he not realize President Trump called us to siege the place?
Honestly, I think the Patriots should have been allowed to go in there, grab those SOBs and pull them out of the building and, you know, have an execution right there.
We have to trust that there's going to be military tribunals and we get to watch all kinds of executions.
They're guilty. Treason. Behead them all.
Bring in the firing squad.
If the Biden inauguration wants to come in and take your weapons and force vaccination, you have due process to blow them the f*** away. Do it.
What? They just say words. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Were you listening to this in real time? I mean, did you know this was going to get this bad?
Yeah, I was listening in real time. It became somewhat of an obsession. I listened from the first moment I woke up until I went to bed. And, you know, it wasn't totally clear to me how far Q had gone. You know, we read this stuff online, we could follow it in groups, but it's a very different experience when you can hear it. And I think part of that is, you know, we can dismiss stuff online sometimes, like wrongly, because, you know, we think it's just what people
like this regular dude, this regular reporter just managed to navigate his way over to the QAnon shit and be in their live chat rooms, and meanwhile FBI and Secret Service and National Guard were like, oh, know what's happening, whoops, I never saw this coming.
Typing behind some anonymous accounts, but when you hear the words, you really connect with the fact
we should
that
definitely unite to the people that are calling for mass executions of the politicians to block Joe Biden being inaugurated, to keep Donald Trump in office. The QAnoners in the far right, they're a fascist death cult. Their goal was to keep Trump in office using martial law. They were calling for martial law. They were the open supporters of a coup. If Trump had actually lined up people and shot them, they would have supported it. That's what QAnon is. It's funny to laugh at, haha, but we should take a step back here and be serious for a minute. That's what the QAnon movement is.
are, you know, regular everyday Americans in some respects. They sound a lot like your neighbors or your
For the first time I've seen someone I personally know like this popping off on my socials, this kind of stuff, and I don't know if I should confront the person or just block them. I mean, if they were a very close friend or relative, I would talk to them and try my best to get them out of that. But if it was just some guy, I'd fucking yeet them.
But they are also, you know, down this path of believing these conspiracies. So it is really disturbing. And I think,
by the way, this guy's a Proud Boy. Wall Street Journal confirmed that this guy's a Proud Boy.
More disturbing to hear it than just to read it. And, you know, the Capitol Hill incident and, you know, other things that we're seeing, that sort of rise in the temperature of among these groups is, you know, sort of foretold through all these audio clips.
So, Stuart, if you were listening to this, what about law enforcement? If they had been listening to this, could they have seen what was coming their way?
Yeah, definitely. We did see, you know, there has been charges filed. There was a man from Queens who was charged after making sort of threats online. But when I was reading that article about him, it sounded a lot like what these groups say in these chat rooms and elsewhere online. And partly maybe that's because it's part of the conversation when you're in these groups. It's the expectation that military tribunals and public executions will happen. They believe that because they think these people have committed horrible crimes, you know, for which there's no evidence. Right. And yeah, it's a disturbing thing. But I think, you know, the law enforcement response is one response, but we can't stop there. There's other places, and sort of by the time you're making threats online, it's gone a little far. And, you know, the responsibility of social networks to sort of add friction to the way this misinformation is shared is really important. And when we saw Parler go offline, I was following these groups, and their reaction to that was, you know, a lot of their sources for misinformation disappeared, and there was a big void left, and there was just not a lot to share and not a lot to talk about when that happens. So I think really that's another part of the solution, and just sort of lowering the temperature and adding friction to the amount of misinformation that gets spread.
But you know, let's listen to some of the conspiracy theories that people appeared to believe in, and then the way they described Trump. Here it is.
So I heard when in 2016, when Hillary was supposed to be president, the military actually stepped in and appointed Trump as the commander-in-chief.
But if you look into it and read the post, it's actual emails from Pence trying to get Trump out before he even won the election.
There's actually some truth to this one. After the Access Hollywood tape came out, there was a massive push among Republicans to get Trump to step aside. This is actually, I don't know about actual emails from Pence, but there was a huge public push to get Trump to step down after they thought the Access Hollywood tape was going to be fatal.
I just read somewhere that Biden just lowered the age of consent to age 8. Has anybody heard anything about that?
You know, you laughed about Tupac and Biggie. He was murdered, and I think it was a deep state that murdered him.
How do you try to interpret all this, make sense of it, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is, people that go online and find supportive networks for this kind of information. I thought it was really interesting that this is an app. It's an audio chat app. Maybe people don't even know that those exist, but it's just one of the other places where this conversation can happen. And, before these networks existed, you might have your friends and your family around. You might share some beliefs with them, and then they might, dismiss you or try to walk you back from the edge of some of these beliefs. But, what we're seeing is just a thriving network online where people can get together. Those clips you just heard are just wild misinformation, but it's extremely common to have that stuff shared. And the way that they see themselves talking about it, they see themselves as fact checkers. They reject mainstream news and they turn to each other to check things. But part of that is just saying, I heard this online. Did anybody else? And if someone else also read that or has another link to support it, that's a pretty good confirmation for them. So, we're seeing just a lot of consequences from the past several years, rejecting mainstream media, rejecting institutions that we're supposed to trust, and having a bunch of people in place to spread misinformation. And now we're seeing the sort of real world consequences of all that.
It is extraordinary, Stuart Thompson, though. I thank you so much for bringing
a lot of those clips you just heard.
Oh my God.